The cold, unforgiving wind that swept across the steppes had a taste of ash and blood, a flavor General Borku knew intimately. For 20 years, that flavor had been the only constant in his life. He sat atop his sturdy Mongol horse, his saddle creaking softly, staring at the smoking ruin of Samarkand. The city walls, once proud and magnificent, were now just black teeth sticking out of the ground. Make sure to watch the video all the way till the end. I promise you're going to find it super informative. We put a lot of hard work into bringing you this content, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, and share it with your friends. Your support helps the channel grow and motivates us to keep creating even better videos for you. Borku wasn't a young man. His face was a map of old battles, etched deep with scars and the sun's harsh kiss. He was one of the great Khan's oldest companions, a man who had seen the rise of Temujin from a hunted tribe leader to the fearsome Genghis Khan. Borku had led the charges, broken the defenses, and stood knee-deep in the chaos that followed. The sheer scale of the slaughter no longer shocked him. His heart, he often felt, had been replaced by a smooth, cold stone years ago, a necessary shield against the horrors he commanded. He had become a machine of conquest, driven by the Khan's unstoppable will. He remembered a day, perhaps 10 years earlier, when he had seen a line of captured soldiers kneeling in the dust. A young Mongol recruit, fresh from the plains, had hesitated, his hands shaking as he held his sword over the first man's neck. Borku had simply walked over, taken the recruit's sword, and done the deed himself, swiftly, efficiently. He looked at the pale, tear-streaked face of the recruit and said, "Do not feel, boy. Feeling is a weight that will drown you. We are the Khan's storm. Storms do not weep." The boy had never hesitated again. Borku had thought that lesson was the most important one he could teach. Now, standing outside the gates of the fallen city in the year 1220, Borku looked at his own reflection in the polished steel of his armor and wondered if the price of that cold heart was too high. He was tired, not physically but deeply in the marrow of his bones. They had conquered the world from the back of a horse, but what was left to rule? Just dust and silence. That morning, the Khan had called a sudden, urgent meeting of his highest generals. This was unusual. Usually, after a major victory, there was a period of resting and reorganization. The Khan had never been one for unnecessary ceremony. He preferred action to talk. Borku dismounted and handed his reins to a young stable boy as he walked toward the Khan's newly erected pavilion. A simple, strong tent that was always less grand than the palaces they burned. He felt a strange sense of unease. It wasn't about the next battle. He could face 10,000 men without blinking. It was about the silence he felt from the Khan. Inside the tent, the air was warm. Genghis Khan sat not on a throne, but on a thick felt rug, surrounded by his most trusted men. Subutai, the strategist, Jeeb, the archer, and Ogdi, his son. The Khan's eyes, usually burning with a fierce, restless energy, were calm, almost distant. He looked like a man who had seen the summit of the mountain and was now planning how to plant his flag. "Generals," the Khan began, his voice low and steady, a sound that always demanded absolute attention. "We have conquered. We have ridden across the lands of the Khwarezmid Shah. Their cities are broken, their armies scattered. But what have we done, truly? We have made a wilderness." Subutai, a hawk of a man, nodded gravely. "We have made the world safe for the Mongol nation, Great Khan." "No," Genghis Khan corrected, holding up a hand. "We have shown the world our strength. But strength is not enough. A single storm can break 1,000 trees, but it leaves behind only chaos. We must build something that lasts longer than the wind." We must build a nation, not just an army. He paused, letting his words hang heavy in the air. Borku watched him closely. This was a new tone, a new direction. The Khan was a man of war, a shepherd of destruction. What did he know of building? From this day forward, the Khan announced, reaching for a scroll of parchment that had been lying beside him, "The rules of this new nation will be governed by the Yasa, my law, the great law of the Mongol people." Borku felt a cold shock, deeper than any winter frost. A law? They were warriors. Their law was the sword. Their structure was the battle line. The Khan's generals exchanged nervous, confused glances. The great conqueror was changing the rules of the game after the victory was already won. The Khan's next words would be the first rule of this new, shocking reality. Borku braced himself, knowing whatever followed would be as sharp and decisive as a battle charge, but infinitely more confusing. The chaos of war, for all its horror, was simple. The order of law could be a cage far more complex and terrifying than any battlefield. The Khan was about to shock his most loyal servants with a vision that went beyond killing. "The Yasa is simple," Genghis Khan continued, his gaze sweeping over his gathered generals, challenging any unspoken doubt. "It is the steel frame for the house we are building. The first rule is about unity. No Mongol shall ever place one tribe above another. We are one people, the people of the eternal blue sky. Disobedience to this law, death." Borku nodded internally. That made sense. Unity was the foundation of their power. They had risen only when they stopped fighting each other. But then the Khan moved on to topics that were far removed from the battlefield, subjects that made the hardened generals shift uncomfortably on their rugs. Next, the women, the Khan stated. Subutai, the master tactician, frowned slightly. What did women have to do with the governance of an empire built on horses and arrows? In the old days, the Khan's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. A man took a woman when he pleased. He snatched her from a neighboring camp, a trophy of a small skirmish. This practice is finished. Kidnapping women, regardless of her status or tribe, is now punishable by death. A low, stunned murmur ran through the tent. Borku felt his own jaw tighten. He thought back to countless raids. Taking women was a common reward, a spoils of war as natural as taking a new horse or a gold cup. It was a practice older than the Khan himself. He remembered the chaos after the fall of a minor fortress just months ago. The general disorder, the men claiming women, the cries that were quickly silenced. He had never thought twice about it. It was just how things were done. Now, the Khan was declaring that this act, an act of conquest and reward, was a capital crime. Borku raised his hand slowly. "Great Khan." His voice was rough from years of shouting commands. "Forgive my ignorance, but the women we captured in Samarkand, the ones who are now serving our soldiers, are they not spoils?" Genghis Khan looked at him, not with anger, but with a cold, clear patience. "They are property of the new Mongol nation, Borku. The old world is dead. In the new world, their value is not in their weakness, but in their future offspring. Kidnapping a woman is not just stealing a person. It is destabilizing the fabric of the nation. It will not be tolerated." Before Borku could process this astonishing shift in morality, the Khan continued, his voice taking on a tone of surprising fairness. "Furthermore, women of the Mongol nation, wives, mothers, sisters, will now have the right to property. They may own horses, herds, and land in their own name, and manage their own affairs while their husbands are away on campaign. They are the bedrock of the home. They must be strong, not dependent." This was revolutionary. Borku had always viewed his own wife, Borte, with respect, but the idea of her formally owning property separate from his own was utterly foreign. It elevated women from respected caregivers to legal, independent entities. It gave them a level of control that had never existed in any society they had conquered or come from. Jeeb, the fearless general, spoke up, a note of confused horror in his voice. Khan, what about the sacred laws of blood? The purity of the line? Genghis Khan's eyes narrowed slightly, acknowledging the difficult topic. In this new nation, the idea of blood purity is a luxury we cannot afford. We need people. We need strength. We need loyalty. Listen closely, generals. The Yasa dictates that all children, regardless of whether they are born to a wife or to an enslaved woman, are recognized as legitimate and share equal rights to inheritance. Borku felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold air outside. This was the moment that truly shocked him. It was a radical erasure of the distinction between the free and the enslaved, between the highborn and the lowborn, when it came to the next generation. It meant the son of a captive serving girl had the same legal standing as the son of the Khan's own wife. It was a pragmatic move to secure a massive future workforce and army, but it was a slap in the face to every tradition of nobility and hierarchy. A slave's child will inherit the same as a wife's? Borku managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. They will be Mongol, the Khan confirmed simply. And Mongol is enough. We will not waste loyalty, ability, or strength simply because of a mother's circumstance. We must be stronger than our ancestors' prejudices. The discussion turned even darker when the Khan reached the topic of loyalty and domestic life. The family unit must be strong. It is the root of the nation. Therefore, the Yasa states, adultery is punishable by death for both the man and the woman. There is no exception, no mercy. The purity of the bond must be protected, or the nation itself will rot from within. The assembled generals, men who had casually violated countless laws and customs in their decades of conquest, were genuinely horrified. They had expected laws about military discipline or tax collection. They had received a blueprint for a terrifyingly structured, ruthlessly fair, and completely reorganized society. Borku realized with a frightening clarity that the storm Genghis Khan was brewing was no longer one of fire and swords, but one of iron discipline and chilling morality. The Khan was building a system so efficient, so brutally equitable, that it would bind the vast, newly conquered lands together more securely than any chain. This legal conquest was more shocking, more permanent, and far harder to fight than any battle they had ever won. The old world was indeed dead, and the new one was terrifyingly ordered. The meeting ended abruptly, as was the Khan's way. He did not ask for opinions or debate. He stated the law and expected immediate, absolute obedience. The generals filed out of the tent in near silence, the metallic clank of their armor sounding heavy and awkward in the tense air. Borku walked beside Subutai, one of the few men he truly respected. Subutai, the master strategist whose mind was as quick as his horse was fast, looked utterly defeated, not by an enemy, but by an idea. What kind of law is this, Borku? Subutai muttered, shaking his head. We are warriors. We understand the language of fear and conquest. But this speaks the language of order. It is more binding than any shackle. Borku stopped, pulling his heavy fur collar tighter against the biting wind. The property rights for women, Subutai. The legitimacy of every child. He is doing more than reforming society. He is ensuring the future of the army. Every child born, no matter the mother, is now a potential soldier, a loyal citizen. He has just doubled the size of his future fighting force with a single decree. And the penalty for taking a woman, Subutai countered, his eyes dark with troubled thought. Death. The Khan has always been brutal, but his brutality was always aimed at the enemy. Now, it is aimed at us, at our men, for habits we learned from him. Borku understood. The Khan system was not driven by kindness. It was driven by efficiency. A man distracted by a chaotic family, a man who steals from his comrades, a man who leaves behind children with no legal standing. These things create weakness. The Yasa was a merciless tool for creating the strongest, most stable empire possible, by eradicating internal weaknesses with extreme prejudice. They walked toward their separate yurts, the large felt tents that served as their mobile homes. Borku saw a group of his own soldiers huddled near a fire, their faces grim. They were discussing the new laws, and the sound of their worried voices carried on the breeze. "Did you hear?" One soldier, named Togon, whispered loudly. "The penalty for theft is now death. Even a small theft, a horse, a weapon, death." This was another key part of the Yasa. The Khan had always hated petty theft, seeing it as the beginning of all disorder. Now, he had formalized that hatred into an iron law. Borku approached the fire. The men snapped to attention, their discussion cut short. "Togon," Borku said, his voice flat, "is the law confusing you?" Togon swallowed hard. "General, with respect, we understand the law. That is why we are worried. We fought for 2 decades to be free men, and now, if I steal a piece of bread from another Mongol, I face the same fate as a traitor." Borku stared into the flames, seeing the reflection of countless distant fires he had started. "Think, soldier, why is the punishment so harsh? Because if you can steal a piece of bread, you can steal a horse. If you can steal a horse, you can steal the Khan's authority. The Yasa does not distinguish between a small crime and a great crime, because all crimes are attacks on the order of the empire. The Khan needs absolute trust among his men. If you cannot trust the man riding next to you not to steal your water, how can you trust him with your life in battle?" He watched Togon's face, seeing the fear slowly replaced by a grim understanding. The Khan was demanding a level of discipline that was almost inhuman. He wanted men who were not just brave but predictably moral. That evening, Borku sat alone in his yurt. He took a sip of fermented mare's milk, but it tasted sour. He thought about the women he had seen taken in raids, the desperate faces, the broken families. He had dismissed those memories as the necessary cost of conquest. Now, the Khan was telling him that those acts were not necessary, but crimes against the state. The past was suddenly filled with ghosts of his own making, acts that would now cost him his life. The horrifying realization was this: Genghis Khan had not just created a law to govern his conquered lands. He had created a law to conquer his own people. He was demanding a moral purity from his soldiers that they had never demanded of themselves. The Yasa was a weapon, forged not from iron, but from absolute obedience, and it was pointed inward. Borku finally understood why the generals were so shocked. They could stomach the massacre of 10,000 enemies. They were terrified by the thought of being judged and executed by their own beloved Khan for a simple lapse in moral or legal discipline. The chilling efficiency of the Yasa was designed to maintain order at all costs, and the cost was the absolute, unceasing terror of its perfect execution. The implementation of the Yasa began immediately and ruthlessly. The Khan did not delay. Messengers, known as yams, were dispatched across the massive empire, carrying the scrolls of the new law. But communicating the rules was one thing. Enforcing them among a population of hardened, independent warriors was another. The true test, Borku knew, would come with the enforcement, and the Khan was not one to delegate the difficult examples. 3 days after the announcement, while the army was preparing for the long march back toward the heart of the Mongol territory, the camp was called to a halt. A massive crowd gathered, summoned by the sounding of the great bronze gongs. In the center of the field stood Genghis Khan himself, unsmiling, with two figures kneeling before him. One was a minor officer, a brave commander named Jurgu, known for his ferocity in battle. The other was a kitchen servant, a woman named Kalan, who was a recent captive from the fallen city. The Khan addressed the silent crowd. Yesterday Jurgu, this man of war, demanded that Kalan, this servant, give him a certain silver clasp, a family heirloom, saying he needed it to pay a debt. When she refused, he took it from her tent by force, in the dark. He committed theft and he violated the property rights of a woman of the Mongol nation. A deep gasp rippled through the soldiers. Jurgu was a hero. He had saved the lives of dozens of men, and the object was just a small silver clasp. Jurgu looked up at the Khan, his face pale with shock, pleading with his eyes. "Great Khan, I fought for you. I have 3 scars on my chest from the siege of Nishapur. It was a small thing, just a clasp. I meant to return it." Genghis Khan's eyes were like ice. He did not raise his voice. The Yasa makes no distinction between a small offense and a great one when it comes to the laws of order. You broke the structure of trust. You stole from a member of the Mongol nation. You have corrupted the very foundation we are building. Borku felt a crushing weight in his chest. He knew what was coming. The general who had seen countless enemies die now watched one of his own men, a comrade, face the ultimate penalty. He saw Jurgu's eyes, filled with disbelief, confusion, and then utter horror. "The law is the law," the Khan stated simply, making no gesture for mercy. He signaled to the executioner who stood ready. The deed was done swiftly and publicly. The silence that followed was heavier than the sound of the execution itself. The message was clear, chilling, and undeniable. No one was above the Yasa, not the lowliest servant, and not the fiercest hero. Later that day, Borku was reviewing the roster of newly absorbed workers, the former slaves from the defeated cities. He found a young man named Bayur, barely 16, whose mother had been a laundrywoman captured 3 months earlier. Under the old system, Bayur was a slave, destined for hard labor until he died. Under the Yasa, he was now legally a Mongol citizen, eligible for land, military service, and inheritance, provided he adhered to the law. Borku called the boy over. Bayur approached, his head bowed low, expecting a harsh command. "Your name is Bayur," Borku said. "Yes, General." "Your mother was a captive." "Yes, General." "Under the old ways, you were a slave." "Yes, General." Borku looked the boy directly in the eye. "Under the Yasa, you are now a free subject of the Mongol nation. You will be trained. You will be loyal. You will be given the chance to rise higher than your father ever did. You will have rights that no peasant in any of the lands we conquered ever possessed. But in return, you will follow the law absolutely. If you steal a single coin, if you lie to a commander, if you break the code of your word, your citizenship is meaningless. You will be judged by the same rule that judged Commander Jurgu." Bayur stared at Borku, then at the spot where Jurgu had been executed. The fear was still there, but beneath it, a tiny flicker of hope and fierce loyalty ignited in his eyes. Borku realized the chilling genius of the Khan system. By making the law incredibly harsh, he made it incredibly equal. For the slaves, the severe punishments were a small price to pay for the priceless gift of freedom, legitimacy, and social mobility. They were given everything but demanded perfect obedience. They would become the Yasa's most zealous defenders, knowing that the law protected them from the powerful, just as much as it judged them. The terror of the Yasa was not meant to weaken the army, but to forge an unbreakable, disciplined nation, where loyalty stemmed not from love, but from a terrifying certainty of consequence and an astonishing promise of equality. The generals were horrified, but the former slaves were given a future worth fighting for, and they would fight like devils to keep it. The Khan had turned the very foundation of societal hierarchy into a massive new source of strength. As the vast Mongol army began its methodical, disciplined retreat eastward, the impact of the Yasa was felt in every corner of the march. The atmosphere had changed entirely. The chaotic, self-serving actions that defined a conquering army, the quick, opportunistic thefts, the casual abuses of power, the disregard for captive lives, had vanished, replaced by an unnerving, almost bureaucratic order. Borku noticed the subtle shifts. He saw soldiers meticulously counting their rations and tools, fearful of the death penalty for even the smallest loss or theft. He saw the newly legitimized women, some former captives, managing their allocated livestock and supplies with a fierce, possessive diligence. They were no longer nameless prizes. They were citizens, protected by the Khan's terrible law. The Khan's focus on the law extended even to the daily rituals. A few weeks into the march, a large group of captured physicians, scribes, and scholars from the cities of Bukhara and Samarkand were brought before the generals. These men were skilled, and Genghis Khan needed their knowledge to govern. These men, the Khan announced to Borku and Subutai, will serve the empire. They are not warriors, but they are crucial. The Yasa dictates that all men of skill, physicians, priests, scholars, lawmakers, are exempt from tax and military service. Borku blinked, stunned by yet another progressive decree. Exempt? Great Khan, that is a huge privilege. Why give such an advantage to non-warriors? Because their skill is a weapon? The Khan explained, tapping his finger against the parchment of the Yasa. If we tax them, they will hide their knowledge or leave. If we treat them as slaves, they will hate us. If we honor them and give them comfort, they will serve us faithfully, sharing the knowledge that will help our people learn to rule, not just to conquer. I do not want to be a king of illiterate shepherds forever, Borku. I want an empire that stands on laws and knowledge. This was the final piece of the terrifying puzzle for Borku. The Yasa wasn't just about internal morality or military strength. It was about nation building. It was a ruthless meritocracy enforced by the threat of death. It demanded absolute loyalty and perfect behavior, but in return, it offered rights, opportunities, and protection that were unheard of in the feudal, caste-ridden societies they had just destroyed. The cost, however, was immense. The Khan's obsession with order led to the brutal policing of traditional Mongol life itself. One morning, Borku found his own young son, Batar, looking sullen. "What is wrong, son?" Borku asked. "My cousin Tulga, General," Batar mumbled. He was caught trying to sell a horse for an inflated price to a farmer. The Khan's yams stopped him. He was taken this morning. Borku felt a sudden, cold wave of dread. Price gouging. In the chaos of the old world, a man was admired for making a profit. Now, the Yasa viewed it as a form of theft and a threat to the economic stability of the market. Borku rode immediately to the Khan's tent, but it was too late. Tulga, Borku's nephew, was brought before the Khan. He hadn't stolen the horse. He had simply demanded too high a price for it, exploiting the farmer's need. The Yasa covered this under a broad clause about fraudulent dealing. The Khan delivered the same chilling judgment. You used the need of a man for your own excessive profit. This creates instability and resentment in the markets. It is an attack on the unity of the nation. The penalty for disrupting the livelihood of a Mongol subject is death. Borku, witnessing the execution of his own relative for an act that every merchant in the world committed daily, felt the true weight of the Yasa. His heart, already heavy with the blood of enemies, was now crushed by the cold, impartial logic of his own leader. He realized that the Khan was demanding that his people become something entirely new, citizens of a perfect, unforgiving legal machine. The Yasa was a clean slate for the empire, but cleaning the slate required wiping out every old, inconvenient habit, custom, and traditional privilege, even those held by the Khan's own family. It was a terrifying price to pay for order, and Borka knew that every man, himself included, would live the rest of his days under the shadow of the Khan's absolutely equal, absolutely deadly justice. The brutality of the Yasa shocked the generals because it forced them to confront their own long-held, messy, and fundamentally unjust customs, and punished them for their very nature as privileged conquerors. Years passed. General Borku, now older and slightly slower, continued to serve Genghis Khan, riding at the head of the armies that expanded the empire further west and south. The fire of conquest still burned, but the structure of the Yasa had entirely redefined the reality of their success. The Mongol Empire was not just a collection of conquered lands. It was a state unlike any the world had ever seen. The law's chilling efficiency had achieved what sheer military force alone could not: lasting internal stability. Borku often observed the garrison cities and the vast trade routes that now crisscrossed the empire. He saw former peasants, now Mongol citizens, entrusted with the delivery of the Yam postal system, a network that ensured the Khan's decrees reached every corner of the realm with incredible speed. These men were fiercely loyal because the Yasa had given them dignity and a secure livelihood. They knew that if anyone, even a powerful general, harmed them or stole their horse, the punishment would be swift and final. The law's progressive stance on women's property rights proved to be a masterstroke of governance. When the men were away on campaigns, which could last for years, the women were empowered to manage the vast herds and resources. This eliminated the internal collapse that often plagued other empires when their male populations were fighting distant wars. The Mongol home front remained strong, orderly, and economically productive, built on the unexpected foundation of female autonomy and legal protection. However, the psychological toll on the old guard, the seasoned generals like Borku and Subutai, remained immense. They were respected, they were rich, and they were powerful, yet they were utterly subservient to the law. The casual cruelty, the quick grabs for power, and the unquestioned privilege of the conqueror were gone. They lived in constant, low-level fear that a single mistake, a lie, a theft, a moment of moral compromise, would bring the absolute hammer of the Yasa down upon them. Borka spoke of this with Subutai one final time, as they sat overlooking the newly secured borders of the empire. We traded the simple chaos of the old world for a perfect, terrifying order, Borka sighed, adjusting the silver belt buckle that now seemed less a decoration and more a badge of dangerous responsibility. We can kill 100,000 enemies without blinking, but the fear of Khan's justice makes us all tremble. He has made us moral men through the threat of the axe. Subutai nodded, his eyes distant. He did not trust the heart of man, Borku. He knew that if he built his empire on the shifting sand of loyalty or traditional privilege, it would crumble. He built it on law, fixed and unchanging. The law is not loyal to any man, not even to the Khan's son. That is its terrible power. Genghis Khan's reforms, born not from kindness but from a genius-level understanding of practical governance, created an empire where different religions were tolerated, trade flowed freely, and the social mobility of the average citizen was unprecedented. But this grand system was held together by the thread of absolute, unwavering fear of the punishment for any deviation. The shock that had stunned the generals in 1220 never truly faded. They had expected a conqueror. They had ended up serving a lawgiver. They realized, in the end, that Genghis Khan's greatest and most chilling conquest was not the cities he burned, but the very nature of his own people. A nature he had successfully tamed, disciplined, and repurposed through the terrifying, beautiful simplicity of the Yasa. His legal code, demanding perfect behavior and offering perfect protection, was the ultimate weapon, a legacy far more enduring than any victory won by the sword. The Khan ensured that even after his death, the Yasa would rule, binding the Mongol nation together with an iron fist of order that shocked the world and his own hardened generals into terrified compliance. The empire grew, prospered, and ruled across the vast expanse of Asia, all because a man of unparalleled violence decided that the most efficient way to conquer the world was not just to kill his enemies, but to make his own people perfectly obedient.